My name is Jan Bates. I'm professor at the University of Leuven. During this year, so 2017-2018, we've organized with the students a seminar on cultural policy, which has taken the form of a special assignment on the curation, organization of a specific object that is exhibited during 2 months in the university library. The object in question is called l'immédiat, which means in English immediate, and l'immédiat is an avant-garde typographical or literary artistic magazine of the second half of the 1970s, edited and published mainly by a colleague from the University of Paris, Anne-Marie Christin, specialist of book history, book design, history of writing, and Philippe Claire, poet, artist, painter, book designer. These two people have managed during 6-7 years to fund and to publish all on themselves a wonderful magazine which has published 25 different issues. Leuven is an important center for avant-garde studies via the so-called MDRN group, which means modern. This is an exhibition with a mission, and this is, let's say, a more personal mission. This kind of work wants also to highlight, to defend the idea that students are perfectly capable of delivering a great professional exhibition. There are 3 rooms in this exhibition. In the first room, we try to give an idea of the historical background of a magazine like l'immédiat. The students have tried to reconstruct the major highlights, the major steps, major periods that go from the experiments of the 1920s till the 1970s. The period that can be considered the last step before the digital revolution. In the 70s, there was in Western culture a strong critique of what is called today, with perhaps an awful word, phonocentrism. And phonocentrism is a kind of philosophy of language which claims that written language is just a mechanical copy of spoken language, while spoken language is, in its turn, just a kind of mechanical copy of what we think. That very traditional idea has been strongly and violently challenged and contested by philosophers in the 1970s, and most of them were very close to Jacques Derrida. Obviously, l'immédiat team could only have a lot of sympathy for that critique of phonocentrism, given the importance that had the visual dimension of language in their approach. What is to be discovered, what is to be seen in the magazine is to be seen or can be discovered without any didactic or scholarly accompanying discourse. The magazine is composed of double spreads. Each double spread of all the different issues explores a new and specific way of combining a text and an image, a verbal and a visual element. Every double spread confronts the reader or the viewer with something perhaps totally unseen, perhaps also with something that doesn't have any immediately accessible sense, since all kind of languages and all kind of sign systems are mixed and combined. It is possible to transform what is to be seen and what is to be read in a personal meaning. They try to reinvent the word and image relationship in each different spread, and when all the apparent possible combinations are exhausted, the magazine stops. It was for the l'immédiat team extremely important to produce new forms of language itself, to promote, to illustrate, to exemplify a new way of thinking about language, of introducing a new philosophy of language, but a kind of hands-on approach. Literally a hands-on approach through material artifacts and not only through theoretical reflection. The second room tries to give an idea of the actual workshop of the magazine. What was actually the work that was done by those who, with their own hands, produced the magazines, those who prepared, who edited the different issues, which were also the books and the other works they published themselves next to their work on L'Immédiat. This is a Dutch-speaking university. L'Immédiat was a francophone magazine, and many of the visitors are English-speaking people. In the exhibition, the central device is a so-called magic box, kind of multiple touchscreen in 3 different languages, which allows the visitors to flip through the key issue, in this case the last issue of the magazine, as well as a lot of material that, for obvious physical reasons, cannot be exhibited simultaneously in the exhibition itself. The visitors will discover, of course, the complete list of all the contributors, some of them completely unknown, some of them famous stars, a lot of women. The idea was to delete all kinds of hierarchy between big stars and Mr. or Mrs. Nobodies. Just as the difference, the traditional hierarchy between text and image, text on top, image below. Images are not just, let's say, considered illustrations or nice complements to arid text. No, these images are considered a real, a true, a profound, a sophisticated communication system. The implicit philosophy, the implicit spirit of the magazine is that language is not just a communication system, it's also a visual combination system. The magazine will put a strong focus on the visual dimension, which is something that changes, reshapes, transforms, invent new meanings. These 2 elements, the idea to combine word and images on the double spread, and let's say the blurring of the boundaries between text and images, represent the unique selling proposal of the journal Immédiat. I don't know any other magazine that foregrounds in such a radical way the possibilities of double spread. In the 3rd and last room, we jump not into the future, but into the present. The present meaning or being, let's say, our post-medium or multimedia or transmedia environment. The students have tried to make a kind of mediological or technological update of the magazine. And they have done it by making all kinds of films, presenting the journal, including interviews with one of the 2 editors who is still alive. They made interviews with international specialists on the transformations of the contemporary mediascape. And they also included a proposal which I embraced very enthusiastically. The students had decided to combine it, to upgrade it, to reshape it with the help of, let's say, installation art, the visual material of the magazine. They have made an installation which combines a small anthology, visual anthology of pages, double spreads of the magazines with oral improvisations by contemporary poets. And that is a very challenging, surprising, amazing intervention. The idea one gets from that kind of avant-garde is very different from the official avant-garde. Here it is the creative aspect, the creative production that occupies the central position. I would like to say something on a specific book, a specific item in this exhibition, which is indirectly linked with L'Immédiat. The title of that book is La Fourche, so the fork, by Jean-Claude Lebenstein, a colleague, a professor of aesthetics. That book is, just like L'Immédiat, an attempt to reshape, reinvent, redesign language, in this case critical analysis of modern and avant-garde art and writing, but to reshape it in such a way that the critical analysis, the critical text itself, becomes itself a work of art. It can be read from A to Z in a linear way, but also in many other ways, and as such it is a very contagious book. So Lebenstein was a very important source of inspiration for the 2 editors of L'Immédiat, Anne-Marie Christin and Philippe Clair, this unknown jewel of the history of creative thinking and creative design in modern culture, is, let's say, typical representative of what this exhibition wants to show. The very first thing that people do when they discover a book in a bookshop, they go to the back cover where they expect to find a blurb. There is strictly nothing on it. Also inside, no information at all. When one starts reading the book, there's an anonymized quotation by the French poet Mallarmé, which says something like, I'm freely translating from, I will read it in French, Admis le volume ne comportait aucun signataire, which means that let's pretend that this book has no author. So what do we find inside this book? 7 essays on, at first sight, very classic topics. Traditional poetry, modern painting, but the way in which these different essays are presented, visually speaking, is often extremely surprising. There is, for instance, a classic essay on the principle, the mechanism of the anagram. In this case, the author does not simply explain how that mechanism works, the most classical example being, of course, Salvador Dali. When you anagrammatize it, it becomes Avida Dollars, which means that Salvador Dali, before being an artist, was first of all a good businessman. The book also explains how one can produce anagrams oneself, not just in a savage, subjective, chaotic, impressionistic manner, but in a very almost mathematical, scientific way. And these methods are also materially visualized in the book. Moreover, each of these 7 essays adopts a different typographical policy. There are, for instance, essays which are presented in the typically minimalist poetry style of the 1970s. There are all kinds of typographical plays with the font size of the letters, the form of the letters. The transformations of the material of the book are always extremely, let's say, well thought, and they obey a certain critical and theoretical thinking. It is wonderful to flip through this book, which to a certain extent can be compared to L'Immédiate, since every double spread seems to be something completely new, forces or at least invites the reader to appropriate these principles in a very creative way. There's a lot of humor in it, and this is one of my own favorites. What you find here is a kind of diagram. There are 2 axes. On one axis you find the letters of the first line of the famous poem by Stéphane Mallarmé, Abolie bibelot d'inanité sonore, which is a kind of manifesto of absolute poetry. So all the different letters are identified, dissociated, and put on one axis, and then on the other axis you find the 24 positions of the letters of our alphabet, and each letter occupies, let's say, the correspondent position in the order of the alphabet. The result looks like a kind of constellation, and the idea of constellation is the master metaphor of all what L'Immédiate has tried to, let's say, to explore and to exhibit, to materialize in a certain sense. You may remember that Mallarmé was very much inspired by the creative potentialities of looking at the stars, and he said, when we look at the stars, we see white spots on a black background, and human beings continue, when they write poetry, putting black spots on white background. This is what happens here, and when watching this kind of images, all kind of ideas, poetic, philosophical and critical ideas will emerge, and this is exactly, let's say, the type of reading that L'Immédiate tried to provoke by confronting readers and viewers with visual compositions that at first sight don't mean anything, but which at second, third, fourth side start shaping, organizing, articulating very profound meanings. And ideas like this will be, let's say, made more explicit in a magazine like L'Immédiat. L'Immédiat is a kind of, let's say, missing link in the history of modern and avant-garde typography. L'Immédiat is also a wonderful, informal, non-canonical, but very challenging and enriching encyclopedia of cultural life, cultural creation, cultural production, of what avant-garde artists, both in France and abroad, were doing in these years. And I would like to thank very, very, very much our colleagues from Bologna for the wonderful work that they did by filming, by making the montage of the material. No worries if you have missed the exhibition in Leuven. There will be a kind of exhibition 2.0 in Paris at the end of the year, so more to follow. Stay in touch with us. Thank you.